Hello and welcome back to the Timeline Astrology Podcast with myself, Gary O'Toole, and my guest today, Kishori. Kishori is the keeper of the carousel, luminous dreamer of dreams and weaver of webs, superfluid shapeshifter, catalytic converter, spinner of tales, singer of songs, dancer of desires, lover of the Leela of life, wild night rider who never grows old. Kishori is a super contemporary creator of state-of-the-art designer software for the evolutionary mind. So I've had Kishori on the podcast previously, and we talked all about the Song of Rahu, her epic poem. And we've also started this series called, what we are calling, Maps of Consciousness, where we take Rahu and place it in each of the houses of astrology, the different areas of life. And it's a sort of a way of breaking down Rahu and taming the beast, as it were, and looking at the different areas of life and how we might experience Rahu in its more contracted form, and then hopefully also be able to experience its release. Because Rahu is very much about the contraction and the release. And Kishori does a great job of explaining that release and that freedom that Rahu brings. Although in astrology, we might be very focused on where we're contracted, where our blind spots are. So today's podcast is all about Rahu in the second house. And the second house is all about what sustains us, literally, physically, as in what food sustains our physical body, but also what sustains us in any which way, and the values that we hold that sustain us, and the valuables we hold also, the resources in terms of our bank balance. So Rahu in the second, of course, can show issues around greed. And it's a sort of thing like where when we're contracted in that state, we could squeeze the life out of the flow. So whether that's in terms of food or money or our sense of self-worth, we tap into all of these things in the podcast. And we started with food.
Yes, it's more nourishment by mind and acknowledging, recognizing, realizing what we really are. And the truth is, in my personal explorations over the years and in the awakening to this state of being already nourished, being Purna, being absolutely able to access anything. And it began kind of years ago when I was looking at homeopathy, and I realized I didn't have to take a substance. I could look at a picture, or I could place it on the bed table, or I could just imagine it, as long as I feel it. And the word knowing is not fully expressing what it is, because most often when we speak, we know through the mind. But what we have to do is look at the ancient meaning of knowing, which is merging with, becoming one with. Like a man would know his woman, his wife. You see what I mean? So the word knowing always, not always, but most often takes the perception of what's happening, of what you're referring to mind, to thinking, to hear. And that's not the case. You have to know with your whole body. So when I speak of knowing, I write sometimes see, know, feel, love, enjoy, consume, something like that. And when you imagine, when you experience yourself to be a separate little particle, if you like, not connected to the wave, that you emerge from, that you still are, then there is this sense of this little thing, needs to eat in that way, to consume something, to keep this little thing alive. But actually, when the true realization, true cognition, true merging with happens, when it takes place, as it will with everybody ultimately, because that's what we are emerging into, a full spectrum presence embodied with, let's call it, I don't know, metabolic flexibility, able to eat, that means put in the mouth and enjoy, or not. It makes no difference, because food is for pleasure, ultimately. And as we awaken into this state of merged with, being completely one with the ocean that surrounds us, that we are, it even surrounds us, is everything, the field, the heart field. And I call it heart field. Someone was asking me the other day, this will come back to ordinary eating in a minute. And as someone asked me the other day what I meant by heart field, well, I said, well, it's the field that people like Sheldrake and many, many others refer to, the field of existence. But I refer to it as the heart field because the access point that I have realized is through the little heart star, the little point of light, which is the what should we call it, the ignition point of the two cells that merge. So it already is what it is. And when one day years ago, I just looked at the air around me. I think I was walking out my bedroom door into the gallery in the stables, and I went, oh, it's all candy floss. Candy floss, filaments of light. And I could see that everything was actually made of candy floss. Now, of course, candy floss is a kind of sweet food, filaments of light, but that biology, modern biology and exploration of nourishment would say, oh, that's poison, it's sugar, and it's spun sugar, and therefore it's no good. The thing is, food, as with everything else, we have to get to that we have to allow the state of knowing that we already are everything outpictured. And pleasure, the third one of the yogic flowers and fruit, the kama, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. The third one is or they call it aims in yoga philosophy, but I don't see it as an aim. I see it as a natural state. It is already the case, so you have to allow it to flower rather than aim towards it, because that also is a separative way of speaking about it. So the thing is, when you get into referring to the act of eating or anything, in fact, we're talking about eating, nourishing, you end up into energizing the language of separation. If food is simply enjoyment, like walking out into a field and smelling the fresh grass and feeling the breeze and the blue sky and the sky and the trees, all the different plants, the little daisies, or looking at the stars, or whatever it is, it's like if the let go happens and the recognition or the realization, the making it real, then everything is enjoying itself. Everything is light refracting on light. So everything in consciousness is already automatically, unconsciously enjoying itself. And if we look at the act of eating as full digestion happens with pleasure, if you eat something strategically, well, I must eat another lettuce today, or 2 glasses of green smoothie or whatever it is, and you don't really want it. If you love it, fine. If you don't really, and you'd rather say, well, I don't actually feel hungry at the moment, I'd like to have an ice cream later on, for example, whatever. Everything can be nourishing. I have played with this too, because I know it to be the case, but playing with it. And I mean, I don't like sweet things very much. I don't really reach for them a lot. But sometimes eating an ice cream with absolute deep, deep pleasure, I mean, really, really lovely, creamy, organic, something delicious. And that is enough for the day because of the amount of pleasure. And it's the amount of pleasure that we get from the food, truly, honestly, rather than what we think about it or what we have learned about it. If you look at and I watch children being fed in India, and in Spain as well, where the mother would just push food into the mouth. Minja, that's Catalan, for eat. Or in India, little balls of rice and push it in. And then you see the child wandering around, it automatically reaches for a bit of raw carrot because that's what it feels like. And eating balls of cooked rice is it's an acquired thing, So if we can make every act of consuming anything that is to eat, I'm going to talk about other forms of nourishment in a minute, but if we can consume everything as a sacred puja, as a sacred offering, as an act of communion, becoming one with, merging, like this thing I said about the beginning about knowing. A man went, in the Bible uses it a lot, and Lot went into his chamber and knew his wife. It's the merging with, the becoming one with. So if there is, when there is real appreciation of the act of communion, consciousness of what it is, to whatever level you have realized. I mean, candy floss is as good as anything, or living light, or love, or whatever you want. But these are words. It's the feeling together with the pleasure. And you only need, you're satisfied. Need is not the word. You are satisfied sometimes with just a taste.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, oh, yeah. Did you ever read, I think it was C.S. Lewis, yes, the Space Trilogy?
No.
No, okay, well, it's not what, I mean, it's reading if you like it, but there's one little bit where Arthur Ransom is the name of the protagonist, the hero, and he ends up taken to Perilandra, which is Venus, by an Eldil, which is an archangel of the planet, to rescue or to save Venus before the fall. Okay, so there's no fall. Anyway, they land on a piece of ground. It's nighttime, so they go to sleep. And in the morning, they realize that what they're lying on is a floating island. And there beside them, they feel hungry. So, the island goes up and down with the waves. It's always surfing the ocean. It's a beautiful analogy of life. That's why I like him, not so much the story, which is lovely, but these little snippets he gives us, descriptors. So there's a tree growing there, and there's some beautiful looking fruit, and the three of them are there. One of them reaches out and picks a fruit, and okay, let's taste this. And it is so delicious, and he shares it with the other two. And it's absolutely exquisite. They've never tasted anything like it. So of course, what do we do, human beings? Oh, let's have another one. The second one doesn't taste quite so good, so they throw it down and say, well, perhaps it was a bit off, that one. They try a third one. It's disgusting. So it's like that, they're being conditioned to that state. And it's so beautiful. If we say create a sacred puja, a sacred communion every time, and we have time and we have the attention make it into maybe lay a little beautiful cloth or a pretty knife and fork or a nice glass or just something. Doesn't have to be a full-scale banquet, but something to honor that you are going to perform the hieros gamos, the sacred marriage, the communion of conscious and unconscious. And you do that for a very few days, you will find that all sorts of hitches with food start to fade. That thing is remembering and loving the practice. But just to do it tantrically, to eat. I've got a little piece that I might send you called Tantric Raspberry, about eating a raspberry, about putting in your mouth and letting all the little pixels melt and merging with the essence. So it becomes you, but it doesn't become you strategically. It becomes the living light or the living consciousness that it is, merges with you in a sacred communion. And it's fun. It doesn't have to be serious. See, I'm speaking about it as a sacred communion. And I mean, people think of that as like, well, maybe you used to go to church. And it's not like that. It's like, oh, wow. Look at this. Just sit and look at the little raspberry with all those little cells. I used to call them little pixels, you know, and they melt in the mouth. And you would automatically condition yourself to eat, just to consume just the best. And if you eat that with that contemplation, which is not difficult to play with, you know, if you just put attention on what it is and have that intention to experience it. So eating becomes, well, a sacred act. And of course, there are other ways as well of knowing that you already are fully nourished.
I've had a lot of difficulty with this part of my life. And it's because I have Rahu in the second house. So I know the contracted state all too well. Like, obviously, I do know the very open state, and what you're referring to makes complete sense to me. And I remember being at a talk once, and there was a panel discussion about a movie about health and food and nutrition especially. And one lady on the panel said, oh, I don't know, you could just eat, like, you know, even like you're saying, like sugar or something, but if you just feel really good about it, like, and she wasn't referring to it like you are, like this deep knowing, this communion with the food, but she was suggesting that, you know. But then that really didn't go down well with the other panelists, because they're all nutritionists, so they're so focused on the, you know, no, that's not a good calorie and that's not this and that. So she was knocked down basically, you know. And so I know that other side of it as well, because I kind of come from that world. And so I've swung wildly in my life from eating atrociously as a young child, and the sugary sweets and all of that, and all of the dental work I've had to have done in as a result of that. So I know the kind of detriment of Rahu, which is a poison as well, if we look at it from that level. But now I've swung the other opposite way, where I'm like completely quote unquote clean eater, like where I'm just obsessed about eating well all the time. So I in a way, I will get triggered by this conversation, and at the same time, I'm just trying to stay open myself to what you're saying, because it does resonate with me at the same time. But I know it's my biggest blind spot. So that's why I never worked in nutrition, even though I trained in it, because I didn't want to, because I get too focused on it. I get too contracted on the Rahu, you know, and then the freedom is there, but I'm so aware of the contraction.
Yeah, I know. I know. And the thing is, it's not so much the food, is that this is the area in which the obsessive nature reveals itself very easily.
Right. That's exactly it. You know, and we can get beyond food and talk about values, like what we're being nourished by beyond the physical. You know, what values are like sustain you as a person, which you're taught by your family. And of course, the second sign, also the second house of this astrology, represents the family unit.
Yes.
The early childhood upbringing. And it's at that point when you're being fed by your caregivers that you learn about these things.
I understand. So you get the mind gets programmed by things that other people have said. But you, the real Gary, the real you, prior to the name even, knows the truth. You know it because you radiate it. And you're playing as consciousness with this merging of the opposites, this merging of, well, yeah, your love is for what I'm saying, because you know it to be the case. Osho used to say, can a fish in the sea be thirsty? So if, as well as allowing yourself to just be okay with the experience of contraction and all the things, and just not bothering to try and change it, just go, okay, that's what I've inherited, okay. And then allow the body, or play with being in the now. Never mind what the past has told you, never mind what the programs are. What do you, as pure consciousness with that pure intent, what would you choose to gift your body with, your experience, your bodily joy, pleasure, your yogic fruits and flowers, and what would you choose? And just daily affirm your choice. Look in the mirror 2 minutes in the morning. I am existing in the now, right now. There's only the now, no past, no future. We live as if they exist. We imagine they exist. We've got a to-do list, and we've got memories, and I'm in the middle of writing a memoir at the moment, but they are not experienced in the past, and they are not experienced in the future. You only have the now, and the now. In that point, what we've spoken about, the point of fusion, let there be light, and these two cells merge in that knowing each other, merging, becoming one, like a man or a woman knows the opposite sex, moves into it, or any sex, or what, it doesn't matter. That merging of two minds, hearts, and bodies. And know that you are, what you are has come from that. Every cell has come from that original thing. So what you are right now, prior to mind knowing anything, is the mass of pure consciousness, a radiant mass of that nuclear fusion that came from the original source, that is self-generating, self-nourishing, self-actualizing, self-anything. The story of our life has come through those experiences that you've taken on, or that we have taken on in the, you can read them in the astrological charts so nicely. What's my astrological chart for? Well, really, it's for digesting. You have to digest those other influences that if you look, you can say, yes, it was my mother said this. If you look, any good Jyotishi looks at a chart and can know what seems to be a more ultimate cause, but the real ultimate cause has to be pure consciousness coming here to integrate certain frequencies. So if we just simply chose, as if you were let's say you're the therapist, or the person, the alchemist, playing with another being to support them, you go, okay, well, what am I going to give you? Okay, so we're going to take a very simple little way of expressing pure intent. Brainwash the body, brainwash your brain, brainwash the neural pathways, drown it in that state that you would choose, rather than the state of anxiety and contraction and confusion around the act of eating, or the particular frequency of the food. You could recognize, even if it was just a moment before you sit down and eat, or before you stand and eat, before you put anything in your mouth, you go, oh, wow, and be full of the mystery of what this is. It's a very quick way to resolve all complications with food, if and when you have the consciousness, and you do have. If you know what I mean? It's like somebody who is really not yet very conscious is going to find this practice that we're speaking of difficult, but you could do it. 1 minute, look in the mirror and affirm that you are choosing now to on your tabula rasa, your blank screen, you're choosing from the now, from that state of frequency that doesn't actually consider the past or the future. You can make that active choice, because you do whenever you speak to a client, or whenever you're maybe immersed in some yogic practice, you are in that state.
But can I just say, I mean, this makes so much sense to me, and it resonates with me, and I have this sense of knowing it, but I have a sense of knowing it only in my mind, because
exactly.
you know, and I understand what you're saying to get into that state, and I could imagine myself being in that state, eating like a chocolate cake. You know what I mean? And right. And I think
is that the worst poison in your mind?
For me, no, not necessarily.
Help
Maybe, you know, I used to eat a lot of these kind of sticky, chewy sweets.
Yeah.
Like, so many, like, you know, and for me now to eat even one of those would be a challenge, to put it in my mouth and to really be at one with that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And even though I know what you're saying, and it's like you talked about last time, I think, when you talked about Ram Dass meeting his guru and they handed him all of these LSD pills, and it's like just popped them all, and it's like didn't do anything. I know that as well, but at the same time, it's so ingrained in me now, because I've spent years being trained, my mind being entrained to think that this is a bad thing, this is a good thing.
So could you imagine yourself making a new practice, just 1 minute a day? I mean, you have to go into the bathroom to maybe clean your teeth, and you could look in the mirror and say, oh, hello, what shall we be today? Let's choose the state of ease and simplicity. And know that you already are. You already are the ocean of everything. And maybe go, oh, wow, what is this? Knowing it's that, you know, the magic is the heart star. I tell you, it's the real magic. Somebody was asking me what I meant by the heart star, and that it's a very hackneyed symbol at the moment. And you know, and I went, well, I was playing with this by direct revelation long before heart math started. If you know what I mean, as a direct realization. This is a living mass. This is, just think of those two little cells going, let there be light, and the whole universe, according to this little drop of consciousness that acquires the name Gary, or other names that may be given, and doesn't matter. But what are you actually? And it can be so full that if you just make the choice to instruct your cells, to instruct your neural pathways, to just do it and flood the body, the cells. They're waiting. They have the capacity to align to their blueprint. But they need instruction. So there's the bridge. That instruction, or that choice, is the bridge between what you, the knower, you, the everything, you, the source of your life, you, the cause of everything, becomes a reality, not an idea, not something that's learnt from a book or a teacher or by exploring, but becomes direct revelation, not just in the mind, but in the whole body. And it becomes, oh, wow. And the cells love this bathing in your embracing, your acceptance of them, that they are, you know, the thing I love to quote is James T. Kirk and the commander of the Starship Enterprise, with your crew that absolutely adore and respect you because they are your expression, and you serve them by reminding them of their dignity, who they are, their knowledge, their ability. You only have to do it a tiny bit, and they start to acquire the state of dignity, of freedom, that is your ultimate nature, that is the natural unfolding. But everything can be nourished. I mean, one of the things I used to play with people is color and taste and beauty and breathing. Now, there's lots of stuff like pranayamas, like using the air, breathe in and breathe out particular patterns and everything, and like breathing in light and breathing out toxins. It's not like that. It's all the ocean of bliss. So you can breathe in now, just go, wow, if everything is the same, I'm breathing in myself. And I'm breathing out. So they're nice games to play. Breathe in light and breathe out toxins. It's great. That's the biological energy, the consciousness. And you are so far, the essence of you is so far beyond that already. And I suspect that most people are actually listening to us talking also, because otherwise, how would they be interested in this? How would they be listening? So it's just practice now, even taking in a breath and going, wow, just become conscious of what it is. And you can make it anything you like, because imagination, it's all just of a piece. It's only one consciousness, one being, one everything. But if you use your imagination, which is key to it all, it activates your feeling. And it's the feeling that nourishes. So if you don't eat with pleasure and feeling like in Kama, like Kama from the Kama Sutra, the pleasure embodied in sensation, it doesn't actually connect. It's an idea. It's like a game I used to play with my brother in my mother's American cookbook, their little fondant fancies. And when we were little, we'd go, I want that one with the pink brows on. But we had such fun that it was like, for us as kids, it was like eating them.
Let me tell you a story. When I was a child,
go on, tell me.
I have two brothers, and the three of us used to be so, like, those blocks of ice cream?
Yeah.
Right? We used to get a measuring ruler, like a tape, and measure out like 3/3, so that none of the other two would get any more. We'd have to get the exact same piece each, or we'd be angry at each other. We're so, like, we need as much ice cream as each other. That's the kind of environment I grew up in, right? So you can imagine now, Rahu, in the second, for me, how that's everything you say is like, resonates so much. And I know that I could make that a practice, and I do, obviously, to the best of my ability. But at the same time, it's still where I am blind. It's still where I'm contracted. And it's so easy for me to talk about Rahu in all the other places for other people, but for this place, it's just a trigger.
Well, I would suggest that you don't say, I am blind in this frequency, because I don't see you blind. I see you as a great being, as beingness, right? An individuated drop of consciousness playing with integrating a frequency. And sooner or later, you as consciousness are intending to integrate it when you've played enough. Now, when you've played enough, you'll get fed up and you'll say, all right, I am now as consciousness on a program, my cells, my taste, and you just have to instruct that this is the state. I've done this in spades now. I tell you, it's a choice. It is a choice.
It didn't make so much sense, and for me, I've been very strategic about it up until this point, and it's to say, hand on heart, it's not something that I practice regularly.
It's love that will do it. And that is a very hackneyed phrase. But love is attention. Love is simply giving attention to what you know, and somehow we get drawn into giving attention to what we don't love. And it's a little error. But if you only give attention to the state that you want rather than affirming, I mean, listen, I'm not talking that I've been perfect I know this because I've played with it. And I know that by programming it, any desire really, any real hunger, it's vanished. As I can eat so little now, But what I do eat, I eat, just one or two little things. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I had a real difficulty with it as well, but it's fallen away as you, because if you play with other areas of your life and nourish yourself with the breath, with light, with sound, with movement, with anything, and practice being in that state that you very well know, and this is for all of us, the state of that frequency of knowing what we're talking about. Because you don't know that state, you do, and you know it so well, because this is what you transmit. All the people that come to play astrology with you, that's what they're coming for, that consciousness that you are. You can apply it if you choose, and you go, okay, body, cells, whatever, all of that I am. Have we had enough of playing with it now? Okay, let's set up a practice, write it down like you might with anything else, and say, right, we're going to do 5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever it is, little bit programming. And if you write it, I have something I call the magic, the magical notebook. It's a notebook where you write down what you wish to experience, what you choose, what you appreciate, and what you want to transform. It's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, right? So creating, maintaining, or defining what you want. And if you just wrote it down in any little notebook where you write your notes, I'm sure you do, because you're a very precise kind of being.
Yes.
You must write notes.
I'm definitely a note taker.
And then, yes.
And a list maker, and I love ticking things off a list.
Yes, exactly. So you can make a little list of the let's say a 3-week programming, and you're going to say, I'm going to start on this day, just like you would give somebody a Vedic practice. And you would say, right, what about it? You talk to yourselves and you say, no, what can we do what practice can we accept that is not going to be overwhelmed, too much, too little, just the right Goldilocks amount of attention. A Goldilocks amount of attention is a lovely way of describing it, because everybody knows that's just the right amount, not too much, not too little, and you can allocate a few minutes, but get into the state of pleasure, so it's not another item on your to-do list or your to make yoga list or whatever it is. And it is actually so simple, and it's a joke about how easy
that now is, for the first time since you started speaking, started to settle with me.
When you could choose.
It's not that overwhelming. It's the Goldilocks amount.
It's the Goldilocks amount of attention.
So maybe it's the small, chewy, sweet, and just make it practice. Yeah.
You don't have to do anything. You just have to. There's 2 things that you could do. You could spend that moment looking in the mirror and choosing and the state. Maybe you might describe what the state feels like, that you're eating this and you're eating that, whatever. It doesn't have to be stretching the boundaries, just anything. And then maybe choosing to have a few seconds as you sit to get to that state where everything is automatically digested, like life. You roll up the carpet of the past as you walk behind you, And so the past doesn't sit in your shoulder like a big heavy bag.
Right. Yeah. This all makes so much sense, and actually what you're saying, I do remember again strategically reading about things and applying things and planning things. I remember reading about this study that was done where they took 2 groups of people, like 500 in each group or something, and they fed them a piece of chocolate cake, but one group didn't feel good about it, and the other group just enjoyed eating chocolate cake. And they took their markers afterwards, their blood markers, and of course, lo and behold, the group that felt good about it, their blood markers weren't affected too much, whereas the group that felt really bad about eating this chocolate cake, they had really bad blood markers.
Exactly. So if right now you don't only consult your head, but you put your hand on your heart, on your belly, on your mouth, perhaps for taste, and feel your whole of your digestion, and say, okay guys, how about it? and see what the response. You might get a little, your whatever your responses are, it's like a fizz or a warmth or a flow or a feeling that, yeah, that's cool. Why don't we have an experiment?
Yeah, I know this so well because I do practice it. Obviously, I have done, not planning to, but I have that sense. But I also am so strategic that I'll even do this thing where, knowing what Rahu is in that strategic way, it's this contracted state, but then it's this open state. It's excess, it's a block, but it's excess. What I'd end up doing a lot is intermittent fasting. So I'll eat in a very short window in the day. So I'll fast for like 18 hours, and then I'll only eat for like 6 hour window. And so it's kind of like I'm really hungry by the time I eat, and then whatever I eat, it's like my cells just are like, oh, thank you, and they just really feel nourished by it. But it's still a bit strategic. Like I'm not like what you're saying, just sitting with it and feeling and opening with it.
Asking your cells or consulting your whole body, and it's not just your idea of what the food is. How do they feel? Because sometimes if you experiment and explore it, your cells and your taste buds and your digestion and your mind, they're all at odds.
Right.
And they have to be in yoga. So it's using food or allowing the act of consumption to be your dojo. Take it for I'm saying 3 weeks because it's standard thing, but you could have any number out of time, and you only really need to do this fully once with the whole of every cell, and it's done. But because we are not all totally in yoga, we've got bits that think one thing, another bit that's programmed from somewhere else, and we store them as the archaeological body. Right? But it's still now. It's not in the past. And also, there's endless other ways of having chats with what people programmed you with, your brothers. You could do sessions, merging sessions, that or taking everything to that heart space. So they come from the heart field. Anyway.
But I want to get to another point here, which I
think. Come on, then let's talk about something else.
Let's talk about something else because it's actually ties in more. It's more relevant to this, which is value, as in self-worth, and valuing yourself and your cells and every single one of your cells. Because let's face it, I've read enough charts of people now with Rahu in the second or aspecting the second, and it creating like big major blocks like addiction issues and not feeding themselves well and all of these things, because it's again intrinsically a value, a sense of self-worth that they might have an issue with, because that's what your family teaches you growing up. And when they feed you good food, you feel worthy. They value you, feel great because you're valued and you value yourself. And even in terms of earning money, it ties in with that. So it has all of these kind of this sense of value, basically. So can we talk to that?
Yeah.
In terms of value. So Rahu, of course, in the second would, of course, can show
yes
extremes.
Yes.
Of not having enough self-worth.
Yes.
Not having enough value. Not literally having enough money. I've seen it in charts of those who literally they become millionaires and then they lose it all.
Yes.
With Rahu in the second.
The polarizing swinging effect. Yes.
Swinging effect. It always seems to be, again, this extreme. It's either impossible or it's easy. Always impossible.
Absolutely. So the real thing, the real crux of all of this, whether we talk about food or anything, is to go to the realization, the state of being realized, and communicating. Know it, even if you only know the teeniest little speck. That little speck, if you put attention on that, it grows and grows and occupies all of the space. And knowing that the you that you really are, this little genius, this little light. Genius is simply your own guiding light. That's what it is. And it fills all the space. So you become sovereign. You become lord or mistress of your own creation. Your body, your mind, what you put in your mind, what you put in your mouth, the value you give. The old idea of going back to food is blessing food and knowing and honoring what absolutely everything is. everything, and merging, knowing that you already are, not even merging, but but knowing that you are everything. Everything rises from that little point of light, which expands into being absolutely everything. So self-inquiry, whether we do it through the map of consciousness that you explore, or any other map, or any, and we are the map and the territory and the diamond body and the consciousness, whatever it is. And by deliberate choice, not accepting anything that was given, because that's the illusory past or the illusory future, but just right now, in that now, because now is all there is. Now there isn't anything else. So whatever you've got in your bucket, in your body, in your cells, in your mind, now, that's what you're choosing. And you have the power, and we all have the power, each one, drops of pure consciousness, all the same, have the power to instruct, to revise, to recognize, to honor this cellular consciousness, the body, the neural pathways, and go, oh, wow, you're thinking that, you're experiencing that frequency, or I'm experiencing that frequency because I'm allowing it. Because you are the Lord of all you are. You're the essential you. So if you really want to choose value, the value of the most treasured, I don't know, a Christ or a Buddha or a king or whatever, doesn't matter what it is, a precious jewel. If you want that, if you desire that, you can feel that your heart desires to be acknowledged. Like the Sufi, was it Sufi? I was a secret treasure, and I desired to be known. I wished to be known. I wished to know myself. And say, I am that. I don't know it fully. Not every little scrap of me knows it, but I am what gave rise to this little point of light. When there's no words, there's no story, there's no nothing, just a nuclear fusion. And you go, okay, well, I must be, what I am must be the same as every other. So if you think of any great being that you would give value and honor to, you are no different. How could you be? It's logical. You could not be anything else. What else you put on, or you have, maybe when you're a child, you don't know, but you do know at some level. There are children being born now who absolutely, they're mind-blowing. And we are still those children. And as those children demonstrate that original nature, your child, or the child you, the innocent one, is still that. But we have the intelligence, or we have the ability to simply, as I said, that very simple exercise, go to the mirror in the morning, having chosen the state that you want, the state that you recognize when I describe it, you know it, and you could easily describe that to somebody else. You could. Maybe you have and could easily do it. So you stand in the mirror and you say, right, guys, this is the frequency that we are going to play with now. I am acknowledging, I am honoring you, but you have to speak. But everybody is your mirror. But your mirror in the morning is one of the doorways. But it's a very powerful doorway. If and when we commit to simply do that. So if you wake up feeling awful about yourself, for some example, I don't know, something's happened the day before and you haven't cleared it, and that is the very first thing you do when you wake. Put your hand on your heart and go, oh. My son sent me a little piece. What did he say? A little voice message this morning. And he said, I see if I can remember it. I am the servant of the one who steals the heart. or falls in love with the one who creates everything. I am, let's say, do you know, I can't even remember it now, but it's like, it was like so absolute. I went, oh, wow. I can remember the last line. No, maybe it'll come. But it's like recognizing, even if it's a little piece by, I didn't know whether it was what Krishna, my son, had said, or whether he's quoting something from Kabir or Rumi. I didn't know. I couldn't. I couldn't tell because it was so clear. Now, programming yourself, that means in the now, because it's the only moment you have, you don't have any past or any future, you can bypass anything that anybody gave you in 3D land, in your past, in whatever the past is. Anything. Because you are more powerful than that. But it's the act of actually that inner action. It's not the outer action, it's the inner action, or creating a circumstance that the inner action is given permission to rise, the inner knowing, and occupy all of the space, instead of allowing something that somebody else said years ago or yesterday, or to occupy the space, the archaeology, you know. So it can be so direct.
This makes me think about one of the key things that the second house represents.
Let's go on.
Which is speech and vision. Like having a vision for something, or literal vision as well, your eyesight and speech. What, not just what goes into your mouth and what you're being nourished by, but what are you speaking? And like that practice of going to the mirror in the morning really kind of resonates in that sense of that needing to speak to that, but also speak your truth.
Yes, because your words carry such vibration. If you are very in yoga, because we're a bit, you know, that we're the 10,000 things. When the cells carry all sorts of other frequencies. When you are in yoga and your word comes from deep knowing source, knowing as merged, your whole body is in union, is vibrant at that moment. It doesn't matter what old programs there were, doesn't matter what fears there are for the future. At that moment, you can then speak what you are choosing, the frequency that you choose to fill your space with, you as pure consciousness, pure love, or the highest that you can possibly imagine, and more.
It makes me think about being in that space and speaking from that, you know, the potential of that to actually, because let's face it, it's still Rahu, and even just speaking about your truth can be for others quite difficult to hear, for example.
Then speak it to yourself until you know it. How difficult is it for you to hear when I speak this? The real you?
Not at all.
No, I say.
No. So yeah,
but it wouldn't come like this if I weren't speaking to somebody that wants to hear. Somebody doesn't want to hear.
Right.
You know, that's as she said, those who have ears to hear, let them hear. But if you don't want to hear, so that's why I say choice. Which frequency do you choose? The mind, I call it Mr. Frosty Breath, is a killer. And it says, who do you think you are? Well, I am what I choose to be. But you have to do the input. And this is the rainbow bridge, if you like. So
that makes not just so much sense, but it really resonates. And I really have to, after this conversation, I'm really going to have to go away and sit with this for a while and make my lists and all of that, but actually, you know, make it a practice for myself personally, because like I said, it is the area of my life where Rahu has grabbed me, and
yes,
you know, it has particular hold of me right now, of course, because I'm in this Rahu cycle, right? And it has been extreme in the past also, but right now, and fortunately, I have at least had enough consciousness to rise above the more extreme expressions of Rahu. I'm not going that kind of addicted route and all of that, but still there is imbalances there, for sure.
But you know what? Rahu, in the song I wrote, it's like he's the shepherd guiding you back, guiding consciousness back to itself, because there is only the one. You as consciousness guiding yourself back, embracing Rahu, so you can actually say, "Oh, thank you for showing me this. I am going to become the freest ever with food. I am going to perform divine puja every time I put anything in my mouth, every time I take a sip of water, every time I consider what I am, what worth, what level of value am I going to attribute to myself, and subsequently everybody else." So you become that radiant source of, because everybody is your mirror, and the ones who are yours, only those come to you anyway. So they have to be, otherwise, they don't come. They come because they're looking for how to activate their own knowing, their own magic with their own self-nourishment. Like, like the, what's it in there? I sometimes remember some of the ancient Catholic liturgy, the pelican, the Pia Pelicanis, or the self-feeding, or like Chinnamasta feeding her disciples from her own blood, or the phoenix. I've got a lovely painting of a phoenix with some on the wall there that a friend did for me. And it's like, we are self-generating. Mr. Frosty Breath, the mind that keeps the lid on, says, no, you're not. And then when you look at the past or you look at old echoes, but when you know that you have the choice, the highest frequency that you can ever think of, that you know of, you're aware of, whether it's a mythological figure or it's somebody that's actually incarnate right now, they are all frequencies. There's only one being, one person, one, the divine Purusha, Prakriti, whatever. There's only that. And everyone is the same one. And why do they look different? Because they've all made unique choices. So Rahu is the psychopomp, is the leader, he's absolutely the key, as he says in the song, the key to eternal life. Because when you stop resisting anything, it doesn't mean keep it, the first act of the first embrace of any circumstance, anybody, any person, has to be that namaste. When I am in that place and there's only one of us. And it doesn't take two, it only takes one. So although namaste looks as if there's to be two, it isn't. It's only you, because everything is you outpictured, you mirrored. So if you honor this, what could this be? What could this body be but incarnate consciousness? And you, as sovereign of this unique drop of consciousness, has the power to choose. When you have a koan, a mind complication, we won't say nasty words, but and it screws your head up, you go, okay, well, that can't be true. Because anything which screws you up is not true. Anything. Mm-hmm. You go, okay, right. What's the real truth? You go to your heart, you go for a walk in nature, you sit, you breathe, you work. Say, okay, what's the real truth? What frequency would you like me to assign you, my lovely selves, my wonderful band of companions, myself, my selves? What would you love? How would you like me to honor you as consciousness, as the divinity that I am? And I've just remembered the last line. All of this, he says, is neither the lover or the beloved, cannot even be found in the realm of God. Because God is an idea, God is a concept. How can we find that? So Rahu is the guide to real yoga, real union, real consumption, real merging, real knowing. And Rahu, because it pushes you get to the point, like the chaos in our beautiful world at the moment, which we don't need to comment on because it's just amazing chaos. In the end, how many consciousness, individual drops of consciousness are going to go, oh, for goodness sake. And you know it's so chaotic. You know it can't be the truth. It's certainly, but it is, in a way, the lila, the play of consciousness. It is. So when you just laugh and go, oh yeah, I see. I've got such a lot of lovely things we can say about the chaos. Not now.
I'm sure, and yeah, I'm sure there's more chaos to cover with Rahu. But for now, I'm just conscious of the time as well, because I know that
it's correct. Well, I mean, up to you. When you say when it's time to stop.
Well, for me, I think that's probably as good a time as any, because I feel like you've covered so many things that obviously have really resonated with me, and I hope listeners as well. Like whether you have Rahu in the second or not, like, you know, let's face it, we're all in this together.
It's a Rahu time, isn't it?
And it's a Rahu time.
Massive Rahu time for everybody.
Absolutely, yeah.
And one thing is true as well, is that time is part of this planetary logos. Time and space, the same as past and future, are really only little parameters so that we can play in the garden. We have to play here. And so we draw it out as time. That's not now and that's not now, but it's all now. It's only now. And so when we say we're not in Rahu, or we've not got Rahu, you've only got to move to a different place in the universe, in wherever on the map, and you can be there.
Right.
You know what I mean? We can all be in Rahu. We all have Rahu in the second house. We'd all have Rahu in all the houses.
Right. Exactly. That's it. Like, and my astrology teacher used to say all the time, instead of getting fixated on one sign, we're all the signs.
Exactly.
We're all the signs. We're everything. So yeah, we tend to, though, kind of compartmentalize and, I'm this, I'm that, whatever, but we're all of it. But having said that, what about the next time we speak? And
talk about that.
We'll talk about Rahu in the third.
Tell me a bit about that then.
So the third house of astrology is our ability to listen, whereas maybe the second is our ability to speak and, to have, to value and all of that, and self-worth, and to feed ourselves and nourish our souls and all of that, and our physical body. The third house is our ability to engage and to speak and listen. And communicate in other ways as well, like the written word. Third house. Third house is also libido. It's also all about our vitality and energy and the efforts we put in as well. It's also our siblings, and they teach us how to fight for ourselves, to stand up for ourselves. So it's siblings as well, but it's any kind of interaction. So it represents siblings, neighbors, short trips around. It's all about back and forth, right? So Rahu in the third, we could talk about that being maybe creating extremes again in that, maybe it's about my opinion, and standing up for myself, and, more about the egoic self, you might say the third house is probably classified as. But it's also about being open and listening to other people's opinions and finding that opening as well. So there's much more we can talk about it, but third house generally is that it's about ourself, when we think about ourself as the small s self.
As the
small s self.
Oh, yeah.
More egoic self.
Okay, well, that's going to be fun.
That's definitely going to be fun with Rahu, because Rahu does well in the third, it's seen as, because it's very much about the self, as well, in an egoic way as well. So we'll talk about that next time.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's going to be fun. Is there really an egoic self? Is
there an egoic self? Yeah. So these are questions, definitely questions I'm going to be asking. And there's
what is the egoic self?
What is the egoic self?
And what we assume it means, it may not be at all what it really is.
Right. So obviously, by you saying that, you've obviously experienced the opening in that way.
Yeah.
But many people don't.
Yeah.
So it's understanding that as well.
To do with that, you like the identity then. So more.
Maybe, yeah.
It's a lot of words. I mean, a lot of things. So
Let me put it simply then. The third house is like when we begin to engage with another, there can be a tendency for us then to become like this me and them, separate self.
I absolutely understand. And then one of the primary things that I play with is the merging of the heart stars. It's a particular process. It might be beautiful to talk about that.
That sounds great. Yeah, that would be really good. I love
how to communicate these surface levels and to express that, and then to go and take it all to the namaste position, if you like.
Oh yeah, that's where it's at. Yeah, so that for me would be Rahu in the third.
And that's great.
Opening it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about that and share a little process with you. Maybe I could just do a little 5-minute thing.
Third house would be this kind of engagement as well online now. We're all talking on Zoom, and it's so easy to kind of get into your. It's like it's different when you're in a space with someone else where you know that you feel that kind of communion. Whereas online, there seems to be it's a bit more disjointed. People seem to be more disjointed or complain about not really being with people. So maybe we could talk to that a bit about how do we.
When you're not with people, you're not with yourself. You have the way to play on Zoom is to fully embody, feel and be present with your feet on the ground, and just occupy the space fully. I had a friend asking me, she was talking about feeling low and a bit depressed. And of course, we all reflect energy, consciousness to each other, light refracting on light. But it really comes from that original light, the genius light, the little guiding light, if you like, of that nuclear fusion. The two cells at the beginning, that's how we begin to play the game of life. And so, I'll do a little thing with you for everybody, and maybe it might help. Because she was saying she wants some basic Kayala yoga practices. Kayala yoga means yoga of noun, yoga of impulse, yoga of just what my heart loves right now, what do I really love. And that's a simple way through this portal to access it.
That's the other great thing about the third house in astrology anyway. It represents this self-interest, but it represents our interests.
Yes.
So what piques my interest? What gets me going? Like in the natural third house is the sign Gemini, which in Sanskrit is called Mithuna, comes from the same word Maithuna, like
joining,
like intercourse, literally.
Yes.
Third house can be sex, literally.
Yeah.
Intercourse between two people, even in just conversation.
Yes.
So this would be a great way to experiment with this, I think.
Yes, I started a few years ago to play with how I could do what I do, how I facilitate online as opposed to in person. And at the beginning, it's very disjointed when you first begin. But eventually, I've fallen into running small alchemical groups of the progress, the falling into the ability to be present to everything and digest it immediately. It's huge. It can be faster than even
do you think that's because, look, this is my sense anyway, is that they're in their own space at home, in their own homes, but they're also engaging?
We are being pushed to be in a kind of retreat.
Right.
When there's less, whatever is going on, I know there's only one consciousness. Therefore, although to the mind, to Mr. Frosty Breath, it might seem, oh my God, I'm not free, I can't do this, can't do that, it's chaos. Actually, there's a huge process of awakening and merging. And truth, or the highest frequency, will or is ultimately the condition of life, condition. It has to be. So whatever you imagine is going on, whether we or anyone, the truth is, the basic truth is fundamental, that the one is waking up to itself, to embody fully. How does that feel? Nice?
Feels good. Yeah, feels good.
Well, let's explore it a bit more next week then.
Let's explore it a bit more. And that's why I suppose in a way I want to keep talking about this, but in another way I'm like, no, maybe let's just leave it till next time.
Yeah, we'll let it percolate until next week. This is the big thing about Rahu. The whole song of Rahu is about Rahu is the beloved. There's nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. And the first thing is embrace. When you become something, then you can shapeshift. If you don't, you're never going to shapeshift because you never get into neutral gear and being, You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How do you get this? One more thing before I go is Osho used to talk about how did the goose get out the bottle, or how did it get in? How did it get out? How do we get the mind out of the mind matrix that we each feel we're living in? How do we get out? I've got Rahu in the second house, I've got this, and I've got this planet there, and that's my box. It's not. You merge with everything. You know that you've made it all up. Not your conscious mind, but you merge the love affair between conscious and unconscious. And when that just out the box, there is no box. You merge with the box. The goose merges with the bottle, and there is no goose, there is no bottle, there is no. These are names that we have assigned temporarily to bits of candy floss or bits of light or bits of consciousness, so that we can play in the garden like kids. But it's not real until you love it. Only what you love is real. The rest is not what you love, and therefore it cannot be real. So if you apply that to any situation that you're in, okay, there's little bits of circumstances that we can set up to make it easier for that realization, like dedicating 2 minutes to looking in the mirror and saying what you choose, and then you make it real because your body goes, oh, wow, and your cells start to love that dose of love and the vibration and everything. And so it's choice. This is the planet or the frequency of choice. When we say the planet of choice, it's the frequency, because it's all frequencies. Every different constellated planet, graha, it's just another frequency. What if, when you really go, oh my God, that has to be true across the board, and it hits you, go, okay, so how do we get there? You get there by choosing and instructing your cells, your consciousness, declaring. We can talk about that next week. The heart star merge that I play with, it's one of the primary games. I call everything I do a game. It's not an exercise. It's not a, it's a little game. And that game makes the mind open up, and Mr. Frosty Breath just face to the ground, goes, okay, I give up.
So there we have to leave it for today. Unfortunately, I could speak to Kishori all day long, but we have to get on, and it's great to be able to come back to this with each house of the astrology chart, and to have a sense of how we can approach it in each area of our life. Because as we talked about, we all experience Rahu in all many shades, in all its many ways. So if you'd like to explore more about Kishori's work, you can always go to her website. It is magicmakeover.com. It's magic with a K at the end, -makeover.com. My own website here is timelineastrology.com. And you can become a patron of Timeline Astrology and get more in-depth daily reports, as well as monthly video forecasts and horoscopes. So go to timelineastrology.com or patreon.com/Timeline Astrology. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to the next installment with Rahu in the third. Until next time.